Next Chapter Podcasts.
Hi, I'm Michael Goodfriend, and I'm the executive producer of the Play On podcast. With me today is Victor Malana Maog, a respected director, educator, and arts leader with over 25 years of experience directing projects, programs, and companies that boldly meet at the intersections of world-class art making, popular culture, and forward-thinking community engagement. Today, I am talking to him while he is at the Savannah College of Art and Design. And it is my absolute pleasure to have him here with us to talk about the Play On podcast series, Othello, which he directed just brilliantly. Victor, welcome to the bonus content series for the Play On podcast series of Othello.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to be with you again and to be invited into this incredible initiative.
I've been telling people this, I believe this is the cruelest tragedy ever written. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think that's one of the first things that we mentioned when we met the actors, which is, are you able to actually step into the truths and realities and cruelties of this piece? I do think it's cruel. Even the very container of which the Othello character is built to try to create something wholly full-blooded and by a man who might not know your experience is also in its own cage. So yes, there's some levels of cruelty and just human cost in doing this sort of work.
By a man who might not know your experience. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
I think this is Iago's play, William Shakespeare, a white man trying to create a black experience.
Mm.
And I think for centuries now, there have been many incredible actors of African lineage who've had to try to wrestle and make fully flesh someone that maybe is not as fleshed out or as multidimensional as one might hope for. And so what becomes a sort of lauded character is actually a sort of encasement, really, of what a person might be, or a shell of what a person might be, and not fully breathing, not liberated in thought, even not even really hopeful in some ways, because it's just a projection of a person.
You've spent a great deal of time working on this particular iteration of the play, not the podcast. I mean, you were spent a great deal of time working on the podcast, but you've been working on this with Infiniso since long before we even knew that we'd be doing a podcast, right?
That's right. I've been working with Infiniso Idofia, the incredible Nigerian-American writer, who, when I met her, was an actor with a couple of plays that were in her desk about a Nigerian family experience. She never thought this series of plays would make it to the stage. So when I met her some 10 years ago, we were doing a stage reading of the play that she one day hoped would make the light of day, but she didn't have much hope. What's happened since then is she's written a whole collection, it's almost like a 10-play or 9-play series of this Nigerian-American family that's been produced off-Broadway in major regional theaters, and she's sprung to life not only on the stage but on TV, and really put a mark on culture. And I've gotten to tag along, and so I met her even before anyone knew her name, before any of her work reached the stage, and Louis, who runs the Play On program, reached out to me. She said, "Well, you've been working on a series of her works in that Nigerian American series. How would you like to do this incredible adaptation of Othello? Em really wants you to work on it." And so I said, let's take on this challenge. I certainly know about otherness. I'm not a black man. I'm a Filipino man, but I certainly know about being considered a perpetual outsider and someone who needs to understand a culture and the coding or the decoding and language work and all of those things So I decided to say yes. And in its own way, you talk about cruelty to be able to step into the language, those words, that world is also very difficult. But that's what we do, isn't it? We explore these things, and I wouldn't do it with anyone else than M, because she is really a beacon and an inspiration to me.
She was, when we always begin with the translator. Of course, we begin with the playwright, Shakespeare, because that's the source material for these podcasts. But then we go to the translator, and Amfaniso you were the only director she mentioned. So this relationship that you have with her is obviously long lasting and founded on a level of trust that's untouchable. And that relationship between playwrights and directors is foundational in so many groundbreaking works that come forth in our day and age. Can you talk a little bit about that relationship and what the responsibility of the director is in relation to the playwright? We talk about somebody like Lynn Nottage, who always starts off with Kate Worski. I'm sure I'm getting the name wrong. But and it seems like the same relationship has evolved between you and Mfaniso.
Um, Something has evolved. I mean, when we first met a decade ago, we were put together on sort of a director writer blind date, talking on the phone, and she wanted to talk to me about her piece, a very delicate landing piece for her Nigerian American series. And I was just blunt with her. I said, the way that I work is this. I will tell you I do not understand things, and I will represent the audience. I will represent a lot of folks who haven't read the books, don't know the histories, and so what you've written, I don't understand, and I don't think she liked that. On the phone, and she tells me she did not like me, and this was not a good first date on the phone. But that's sort of like transparency, and even like owning up to both my dramaturgical eye, but also my stupidity or my lack of knowledge or my narrowness around certain subjects helps bridge her work to a wider audience, or bridges her work to those who may just not know that subject matter. And so that's what I always represent, and that's what I serve for her. If and you were in many sessions with us, Michael, and you really are a great receiver and editor and supporter of all these things. And you said, whatever you need, we will do here. And you're an exceptional executive producer in that way. And so what I try to do in that light is I try to be the person who listens, absorbs, brings back an idea that might not be the exact thing that the writer wants, but hopefully propels that seed, that vision forward, even if it may seem counterintuitive to what their own movie is like. And it's in that friction of me in service and sometimes trying to rattle my brain and all the different aesthetic tricks and frames that I might have that hopefully wakes up the play even more so, and inspires them to keep digging into the play, or inspires them to rewrite or dig into a thread of the theme or the action or the plot that is dangerous for them.
I hear you saying that the director, your job as the director is to ask questions,
challenge, sometimes rattle, all to ignite something. And almost always, I always say yes, Michael. I always say yes to whatever their idea is, so that I know, so we both know that it is the right way or the wrong way. And I say yes in a big way. You almost will never hear me say no to a playwright's idea, so that it's never a question if that was the way. We went full like guns are crazy out in that direction, and then we're going to make a U-turn or whatever we have to do to answer what they're really trying to get at.
What are you igniting with this telling of Othello? What are the questions you're asking, and what are they doing? What are those questions? How do they ignite a listener, a performer, an interpreter of this work?
What we're igniting is hopefully the sense that this language from 400 years ago is as resonant as today. What we're also igniting is that the music and the musicality and the pauses wake up our cells to these deep, painful stories, things that are working at a different level. It is, as Emphaniso is, as Shakespeare is, deeply musical, deeply dissonant, and there are screeches and tones and breath work here that is not just poetic, but primitive and animalistic and base and desperate and choking. It's trying to almost capture the person who is both socialized and speaks and works in a social context, and then our base survival instincts and are the way that we choke and kill both ourselves and one another. And those are the sounds that cannot be denied, no matter what century you're in. A screech is still a screech. A choke and a gasp and a suffocation is still that. And we're trying to awaken the audience to this sort of human suffering and cruelty and evil and flattening of human spirits and personage.
What do we gain, do you think, by seeing and experiencing evil?
Well, I'll tell you what I do. There's many times where I want to close the shutters, flip on the YouTube, and just scroll my life away. And I think to be able to work within the pauses and the breaths and to examine a character like a Iago, who is as kind, as sweet, as gentle, and hopefully unsuspicious as can be, and understand that this figure is as manipulative, as dastardly, but also comes forward with a face of love. So it gives us an awareness that evil comes in many different ways. But also what it shows us is the evil of having to portray roles that we've come to accept because of society and the way that we've accepted things without question, of who we can marry, who we can love, what our children are supposed to look like. I mean, this is deeply resonant with me. I'm Filipino, born in the Philippines. My wife is half Greek, half Albanian, white, born in America. And our kids are of different heritages. And so how do you navigate the world where someone eyes you in a different way, whether spoken or unspoken, questions the validity of a relationship or intelligence or status? For me, that's deeply personal. And it's also deeply personal that these stories with our thumbprints today in 2023 can be opened up in some sort of time capsule 500 years from now, and to have an adapter like Emphaniso and a cast like we have give voice to this story is very powerful for me. That's the power of exhibiting evil, or at least wrestling with evils.
What is your relationship with Jeremy Tardy, who played Othello in this podcast series?
Jeremy Tardy is an extraordinary young actor. And I met him some 10 years ago. Late 2000s, I was running a performing arts program, a training program in the mountains of Colorado, in Steamboat Springs, where Olympians train and whatnot. It's a a very old performing arts program, dance, theater, equestrian programs happened there. And I took over in 2008. What ended up happening was, as I took over the program, I wanted to have a student body that that reflected the world that I lived in. That means a diverse world with folks who actually had a point of view and were going to actually have the courage to participate in the culture and in the stories that they tell. And one of the things that I did back then was I had a partnership with the Juilliard School, Jim Houghton Juilliard School, and his students would come train with me in the summer times. And for anyone who went to Juilliard, this is a jaw dropper. Like nowhere in the world was Juilliard allowed to train besides Juilliard. But Jeremy was moving from his freshman year to his sophomore year, and he was one of the two students from Juilliard who came to train with me in that summer. I believe it was the summer of 2009, and he just went out to the boonies with me where horses played and where Agnes DeMille learned the cowboy dances that went into Oklahoma, and he trained with me up in the mountains there. And I just remember him being so diligent with study, always carried a book around, always so focused, but always kind. And for me, really the reason why I teach, Michael, is because sometimes I get sad in the world, right? I get sad with this business. There's a lot of negative things, commercialism, just some jerks. And I thought being able to teach meant that I could be with a group of people in creating a sort of kindness and culture and storytelling that I could continue to work and live in. And so it's always been my dream to work with former students. And so we called Jeremy up. I said, who can embody this role? And we just, you and I, to your credit, said we need to find the right person for this role, because once we find that trust and that level of humanity, however this role is played will become just rich. And Jeremy has done that, and he's gone on to be on TV and one of the leads in a Ron Howard series on ABC and whatnot. But he still picked up the phone and said, "Hey, let's do this thing," even with his sort of teaching schedule now. That's the relationship that we have, and I think that's a relationship that I saw throughout this entire next chapter podcast series. All the folks who came in this room came out of the trusted relationships that we all had brought through the decades, and I thought that was really cool. It was really, really cool to be back in the room with Jeremy, who did a bang up job, and I still shake after I hear those first takes. I still do.
And Kaylee Carter, was she a student of yours as well, who plays Desdemona?
No, she was not. She is one of the highlighted alum at SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design, where I'm a professor. And you know what? She called me up one day, and she wanted to help. She was in town, and she wanted to coach some of the acting classes. And so I just met her, and I had coffee, and I just talked to her, and there's just a sort of dynamic quality to her. And I said to her, I'd love to work with you one day. She had just a ferocity, intelligence, and just sort of a personal mission with the work. And I knew this sort of agency was something that I wanted in Desdemona. We both wanted something contemporary, Desdemona that wasn't, if you will, just milk toast. Mm-hmm. And so she brings that sense of the contemporary, but this sort of someone trying to burst out of their own silo at that time. And so she answered. I met her having a coffee, and our casting director from Telsey brought her to the table, and I knew her. And of course, she has a body of work that is really astounding. So she's no slouch at all. But I knew that we had the opportunity to get someone really singular in that role opposite Jeremy. And she said yes.
The chemistry between them is so palpable. And it's remarkable to me that there we were in booths separated by 1,000 miles, and yet we feel as though we are there in intimacy of that relationship with him. The love between them is so palpable, and the pain of their destruction is so extreme.
Love.
It's just gut-wrenching.
I love actors, Michael, you being one, and you being not only a wonderful producer, but also somebody who is an artist. The cost of doing these things, to go uh, even in a solitary booth, to be choked, to understand the pain. I mean, even though we're around the country in different little spaces, we understand the cost of each person. We hear it. And that's what I think great actors do. And that's why we can never forget these performances. I mean, I don't want to blow up what I heard today, but I mean, it seared something deep in me. I mean, it's unbelievable what happened in different pockets of America that comes together in this episode. But there's a cost. There's a cost. It's these are not easy moments for actors to portray. So I really appreciate that these guys did it, even across time, across space.
Join Play On Premium to get merch like t-shirts, hoodies, and coffee mugs, ad-free episodes, and bonus content video featuring interviews with the actors, producers, playwrights, and directors who brought it all to life. Go to ncpodcasts.com and subscribe to Play On Premium to support the art and the artists.
Are you comfortable with continuing to do this play, or do you feel like you've now done it and you want to move on?
I love that this version of the play has been in the stage reading form. Now it's a published form from the Play On series, and that it's in this podcast. But nothing beats the idea of getting in a room and doing it in front of people and creating an event where you're encased and become witness to this sort of murderous action, and everyone's a witness and accountable at the same time for not turning their heads, for letting that happen. Short answer, yeah, I'd love to do it, and I'd love to do it, and I think it needs to be done just to see these actors of carry the roles of a lifetime. I mean, that's the thing. That's also why I'm in this space, Michael. I never thought I'd be directing Shakespeare. I love being in the Shakespeare space. I'm unfortunately one of the few directors who can work at a certain level with Shakespeare and musical theater and things like that, just because of my background. I mean, these are sacred spaces, right, for art and culture. So yeah, we got to get it on the biggest stage and put on a production like this, and with the sort of with the rhythms that are sort of the Shakespearean rhythms, but they're still so contemporary today. Yeah, totally. Sign me up.
I know our time is limited, but I do want to ask you, you didn't know Barrett O'Brien, did you? The actor who plays Iago, before we did this.
No.
What was that like? So this actor who you don't know at all, whose work actually I don't know if you knew, but we brought him to you. You trusted the choice. That's a leap of faith, I must say, for a director to entrust somebody they don't know with the responsibility of a role like Iago.
Yes. I mean, I try to play casual on podcasts and on TV, but I'm a director, a lifelong director. And I try to play folksy if I can, but I'm a control freak. But I was in those meetings with you, Michael. You knew the quality of actor that and the quality of person that we liked, and the sort of steel cage we were making. And you brought him forward, and you said, "I think I have the guy." And you said, "Do you need to meet him?" And I said, "No, I trust you, Michael. You had been in, point by point, every part of the creation process. And, it takes a lot to trust, but I knew that you understood what the soundscape was going to be like the quality of the actors, the engines behind them, the pivots, the swings. And so I knew that you'd find someone right for us. And if you didn't, I would hunt you down.
Yeah.
I would hunt him down. But he was awesome. He was more than that. He was a gentleman and like the biggest heart, of course, which is all. You're surprised that he can pull out such a Iago because of all the dark shades. But this Barrett O'Brien is a gem, and I'm so glad you introduced him to us. And I will, hopefully work with him again if he'll have me. But yeah, thank you for that. That's what it was like. It was not hard at all, because once I heard him, I knew he was right.
It is remarkable to me that some of the best portrayals of villainy are wrought by people of incredible integrity and abundant love, like Barrett. I have you experienced that as a director, that casting somebody who actually appears to have the opposite attributes of the character can bring those attributes forth more vividly somehow?
I don't know if I'm a very good director sometimes, and sometimes I'm an awful director, by the way, and I need great actors to help shepherd me. But what I do and what I do know is that I can work with actors to shepherd through some of the fear fear of being ugly, violent, sharing the darkest shades of ourself, that whether we know that or that's been part of our constellation or our family tree or whatnot. And what struck me about Barrett is that he was unafraid to go to those places. And, I'm not meant to question where that comes from or how he knows that, or how, today, I can sit calmly with you, though probably some years ago, one could call me a mega tyrant. So I can say that I admire the actors and do work with actors in shepherding fear around these things about the vile quality of humanness, or even our person. And he went there, and I'm thankful for that. And just like Haley and Jeremy went there to these places around betrayal or their own mutilations, if you will. But that's awesome. That's why I get to have a front row seat to that. And so thanks for bringing Barrett along. Awesome dude.
Thanks for being game. I have to say that the room you created for this project was one of such incredible trust, and the feeling of love was abundant every single day, and in every take, and the direction you gave was with such gentility and gentleness. I don't know if that's redundant, but there was no question that it was a safe space. And I think that's just imperative in all the work we do, but especially with a play like this, a story like this, that is just brutal. And the translation that Mfiniso did is brutal. It pulls no punches.
Just to zoom out a little bit, I have to share that there's a container here for that sort of work, right? Because we do build trust and build in all sorts of different ways. And then we can find the momentum to work in with the depth and speed and pace and cunning that we can. But if we zoom out, one of the things that you agreed to and provided right away, next chapter provided right away, was the idea of not only a dramaturg, but a cultural consultant in dramaturg Martine, to talk about not only the histories and the nuances of story and research, but also the pathway to playing these characters, and how do you take care of yourself as an actor. So we had spaces for Jeremy and all the actors, actually, and Kaylee and Barrett and all the players, to be able to touch base with her around this sort of like the hot button issues, the mental anguish it takes to play these roles in a short number of hours, and then try to go back to real life, because it is a real, it's a real offering for anybody. And so thank you for that care and that platform, and frankly the funds to make that happen. That, I mean, show me the money, right? Show me the money that we can actually have that sort of safe space. I think if people didn't feel that way, that we wouldn't be hearing the sort of performances that we are getting.
I totally agree, and I will say it was not my idea. The idea originated with Louis Douthit from Play on Shakespeare, and was then echoed by Mfiniso, and so for me it was a no-brainer that we had to do this. And boy, am I glad. I think that it's necessary. I'm sure it raises eyebrows occasionally among audience, like, cultural consultant, what is that? Why? And I hope we can get Martine Green Rogers on just to talk about what that is and the necessity for it in our day and age. There's so much more to talk about, Victor. What you're teaching at, you mentioned Savannah College of Art and Design. I mentioned it in the intro. You're a professor there. What do you do? What is it that you're teaching?
Well, we have an incredible faculty of very well educated and very strong credentialed people. So I sometimes question what I am teaching. Right, when you have all these experts, I just go, well, I think I do technically teach acting, audition, directing. I also do main stage productions. We're building up a music theater program. One of the things that's really cool about SCAD is that it's a boundary breaking place. We have a Hollywood backlot, resources that rival Hollywood studios, and it's a real place. But to your question, what do I teach? What do I want to teach? I teach folks that their personal text is valid and that they have value to a room. And so their version of Juliet is going to be different than another person's, and which is really a crucial step in, like, I think, actor training, as opposed to just being a commodity.
Well, I know you have to go teach a class, so I'm not going to keep you any longer, but it is an absolute pleasure to just peek a little bit deeper into the process of creating these podcasts, your journey with this story and with Mfiniso throughout the years. Thank you so much for your exquisite work and sensitivity in telling this story. It's our privilege that you agreed to be a part of it with us.
Thank you, Michael, for switching the schedule so that I could work on it. More than that, thanks for your delicacy in all the moments of the play. There's no moment in this play that is without your touch and your intelligence and your support. So right back at you. You keep on doing awesome work, all right?
Thank you. You've been listening to the Play On Podcast bonus content series for Othello. You can learn more about the Play On Podcast at Next Chapter Podcast website, ncpodcast.com. That's N as in next, C as in chapter, podcast with an S at the end.com, where you can find other Play On Podcast series and interviews, along with talk podcasts like The 500, The 10, Beef with Bridget Todd, and a whole lot more. I'd like to thank Jeremiah Tittle, the founder of Next Chapter Podcast, and my producer, Pete Musto. Our audio engineer, editor, and sound designer is Justin Cortez. Be sure to subscribe to Next Chapter Podcast for updates on all the latest content, and don't forget to rate and review our shows. I'm Michael Goodfriend, and I look forward to sharing more incredible works in the Play On Podcast series with you, along with lots of enlightening bonus content at Next Chapter Podcast.
Next Chapter Podcasts.